Scaryscreamerz Story 1. The Storm Watcher's Last Broadcast. Location, Key West, Florida, 2024. I've lived through a lot of hurricanes. I'm a meteorologist stationed in Key West, so tracking these storms is part of my job. But Hurricane Helene was different. I felt it the moment the storm popped up on the radar. The patterns it made were strange. Tight spirals that almost seemed intentional, like it was being directed. The first night, as the storm edged closer, my equipment began to glitch. Nothing major at first, just a little static over the radio, some interference with the satellite feed. But then it got worse. I'd hear odd sounds in the static, like distant whispers that weren't coming from my team. I laughed it off, telling myself it was just the wind messing with the frequency. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next night, everything went to hell. I was alone in the station, watching the radar as Helene churned closer to the Florida coast. Suddenly, the image froze. Right as the eye of the storm locked into place, my heart stopped. The shape was too perfect. It wasn't just a storm, it looked like a massive, staring eye, and it felt like it was looking at me. I tried to reset the system, but every time the image reloaded, the eye was still there, bigger and closer than before. The power flickered and the lights dimmed. Then I heard it, the voice. It was so quiet at first, I thought it was just the wind. But as it grew louder, I could make out the words. "We've come for you." I spun around, but no one was there. The storm was howling outside, shaking the windows. I rushed to the emergency radio to send a final warning, but all I got was static, and through it, a chorus of voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering in unison. I looked out the window, and there, in the swirling clouds of the hurricane, I saw them. Faces. Dozens of them, pale and ghostly, twisted in agony, their mouths moving in silent screams. They were the souls of the drowned, pulled into the storm, trapped there forever. I tried to run, but the storm slammed into the station. The wind was so strong, I thought the walls would collapse. And then everything went black. No one found me. No one ever will. My last broadcast plays on repeat, my voice blending with the static. Just another ghost in the storm. Story 2. The Silent Evacuation. Location, Miami, Florida, 2024. I should have listened to the evacuation orders. But growing up in Miami, you get used to these hurricane warnings. They're serious, sure, but most times it's not as bad as they say. So when they told us to evacuate for Hurricane Helene, I stayed. That was my first mistake. It started a few days before the storm hit. People in my apartment building began leaving. At first it seemed normal, everyone packing up, heading inland. But then things got weird. I'd knock on a neighbor's door and no one would answer. The next morning their door would be wide open, lights still on, food left on the table. But the family was gone. No one saw them leave. As more people disappeared, the air felt heavier. I'd hear noises in the hallway at night, footsteps, whispers. But when I checked, no one was there. The storm was still a couple of days away, but the wind had already picked up. You could feel the pressure in your chest, like the air itself was too thick to breathe. The night before Helene was supposed to hit, I heard someone knocking on my door. I opened it, and there was nothing. No one. Just the wind howling through the empty halls. I slammed it shut, bolted the lock, and tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. Then I heard it. Whispers. They were coming from outside, from down the hall. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded urgent, desperate. I pressed my ear against the door, and it was like a cold hand gripped my shoulder. The whispers got louder. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the window to see if anyone else was left in the building. What I saw, I'll never forget. The parking lot was flooded, and in the middle of the water, I saw figures, people walking into the ocean, slowly one by one, their backs to me. They were the missing neighbors, their heads tilted back as if in a trance, wading deeper into the water until they were submerged, swallowed by the dark waves. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't care about the storm anymore. I just needed to get out, away from whatever Helene was bringing. But when I got to the lobby, the entire building was empty. Not a single person left. The storm hit that night. When the rescue teams came the next day, there were no bodies, just empty apartments and silence. Story 3. The Haunted Lighthouse of Pensacola. Location, Pensacola, Florida, 2024. I was sent out to the old Pensacola lighthouse to prep it for Hurricane Helene. I've done this kind of thing before. Basic stuff, like boarding up windows and making sure everything's secure. But from the moment I got there, something felt wrong. The lighthouse is ancient, standing at the edge of the bay, and people say it's haunted. I never believed in any of that. But the minute I walked inside, I felt like I wasn't alone. The air was stale, thick with the smell of salt and rot, and the wind outside was picking up fast. I climbed the stairs to the top, trying to shake the feeling that someone was watching me. When I reached the top, I turned on the light. It flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the water. I was about to head back down when I saw it. Out in the storm, a ship. It was huge, an old wooden galleon, like something out of a pirate movie. But it couldn't be real. The sea was too rough, the waves too high. I grabbed the radio to call it in, but all I heard was a static. And then a voice, clear as day, said, "He's coming." I froze. The ship vanished into the fog, and I turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. He was drenched, his clothes ancient, his face pale and sunken. He pointed out to sea, and I followed his gaze. The ship was back, closer now, its sails tattered, the deck swarming with shadows. I ran. I didn't look back. I could hear footsteps behind me, heavy and deliberate, but I didn't stop. When I got to my truck, I peeled out of there, speeding through the rain as fast as I could. I glanced back once, and through the storm, I saw the lighthouse light flicker once before going dark. The storm hit Pensacola that night, harder than anyone expected. The next morning, when I drove back to the site, the lighthouse was gone, just rubble and debris where it used to stand. But here's the thing, I checked the records. That lighthouse had already been abandoned.
Remember the last time you used a public restroom?